Hi, hello, welcome back. Welcome back. That was the laziest intro ever. If you happen to find yourself an author tip today, then my name is Ella. This is my channel where I talk about writing, laugh a lot, edit badly, so that's fun. I just realized I forgot to open my notes. Okay. I don't know how to start this video. Fire. This is the... Let that concept sink in for a moment. Right. Why is everybody obsessed with fire in literature? And just media in general. Like, so many movies and so many books end with something burning down. So originally this video was just going to be about just making fun of myself about how everything I write ends with something burning down and how, oh, I'm a pyromaniac, because that's what all my friends call me, because I post videos on my Instagram story of fires that I make. Here's one. Like when I was at camp. No, I don't condone arson. You don't know what incoherent means? It means I'm not coherent. All my friends think I'm a pyromaniac and an arsonist, apparently. I don't condone arson, but I just think it's entertaining to read about. And write about, as I'm going to be mentioning now. The first short story I've ever written started with the main character's house burning down. The novel that I'm working with right now, fire is a huge symbol in it. My fantasy trilogy ends with the entire kingdom being blown up. And then my NaNoWriMo, my first time, that novel that I've talked about a couple of times, ends with a church burning down. Because I was very angsty. Yes, okay. So, obviously I love writing about fires, and I got into a rabbit hole on the internet about the symbolism of fire, and wow, it is confusing. It is really confusing and interesting, and I'm going to be talking about this now, and some of it is going to sound like a 9th grade English essay, and that's that, okay? So, yeah, I think I said everything. The first thing I found interesting about, like, the whole topic of fire was how wide of a spectrum its, like, symbolism spreads. Like, it can symbolize passion, desire, rebirth, resurrection, eternity, destruction, hope, hell, and purification. And that's when I started getting interested, because, like, it can represent things like passion and desire at the same time as representing destruction and hell. Like, okay, this is when I slowly began to realize that it is so contradictory. And is this just... Okay, am I the only one who finds this really interesting? So I'm going to go through examples of this. Like, okay, I'm not coherent today, I'm sorry. I'm never coherent on this channel, though. It's kind of part of my brand at this point. What's up? As far as it is being used to represent passion and love, like, it always has been. Like, it's described as like a spark of fire. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1, the phrase used metaphorically is a fire sparkling. Sparking? I'm pretty sure it's sparking, but in my notes I wrote sparkling. What is this, Twilight? A fire sparking in lovers. Which was actually particularly interesting to me, since, like, fire to me is something that always eventually dwindles and dies, or it can be taken out by like, water very easily. And that's, kind of what happens with Romeo and Juliet. It eventually ends to their downfall, fire is something that always eventually dies, and Romeo and Juliet die because they loved each other. So is the fire really representing their love, or is it representing their inevitable destruction? And then I'm like, oh, destruction, because fire also represents destruction. Are we coming up? Hi, my dog always interrupts my videos now. Hello. Would you like to say hello to my 7 viewers? Are you part of the Pyromaniac support group? Okay. You may leave. Have fun. You can also see the phrase, like, fiery love used to describe a very, like, passionate love for people, or between someone and their love for something else. You know what love is. I do not need to explain this to you. So, like, in conclusion, fire can represent passion, but it can easily represent destruction as well, Think of a forest fire. There's a fire, it keeps spreading, eventually burns down the entire forest. However, in its wake, usually something new is brought up. Like, when a forest burns down, sometimes it just, like, burns the shrubbery and all the dead stuff, so new stuff can grow there. Like, okay, so fire can represent hope and destruction at the same time. Because, obviously things are dying, but new things grow in their wake. It's bittersweet. And I'm like, okay, so we get further into contradicting itself whenever fire is used. Think also of the phoenix rising from its ashes. That is a very classic example of this, too. Another thing fire can represent is eternity. Think of, like, the eternal flame, which could mean, like, a belief that sticks with us, or our ideology, I can't say that word, or a deceased person, like a war memorial. We usually use the eternal flame. But as I mentioned earlier, like, fire, I don't really get this one, because fire isn't eternal. It doesn't burn forever. Usually it dwindles and dies, or it can be put out very easily. So that contradiction that's just my personal belief. Another, like, thing that fire can represent is hope. Think of, like, the light at the end of the tunnel. It can represent, like, a salvation, because fire was used for light and warmth when it was first founded. So it can represent a warm safe haven, or the light at the end of the tunnel. But also, at the same time, it doesn't always represent salvation, as it can also represent hell. I think a really good example of this is the end of Toy Story 3, where they're, like, in the garbage chute, but they see the light at the end of the tunnel, so they're running towards it before they realize that it is not daylight, but a fire that they will get burned in. But Toy Story, Pixar is really coming through on this one. But as far as it representing hope, there's also, like, the Statue of Liberty, who obviously is like this and holding a torch at the end of her hand, which represents freedom and liberty for any travelers who are coming to New York City and to get a new life. So, fire, confusing. But on the other hand, like, being burned alive is considered one of the most painful things a human can endure, for obvious reasons. You're being burned alive. And fire is a popular symbol of hell, obviously, because the Bible. But also in the Bible, it says that fire is a way of purification for sins, because it leaves behind nothing but ashes. For example, to purify a witch, they would historically and culturally be burned at the stake to be purified, so they'd be nothing but ashes. So there's some examples of what fire can symbolize. In my personal work, in my short story, it was really just I was 10 and I wanted an angsty plot point. But in my fantasy novel, it did represent the purification of this very corrupt kingdom that, well, its kingdom split into two. They were in a civil war, but both sides were extremely dysfunctional, and the only way that it could end, the characters thought, was just destroying it all, which I think is personally idiotic, but it is symbolic. But at the same time, it's literally killing this whole kingdom of people, so it does represent destruction. Like, it is not a happy moment, although it's purifying it all. Man, those characters are just so pretentious. In my first NaNoWriMo piece, it demonstrates hope for the future and hope that they'll be able to escape, because it is like a cult book. The church represents this cult. And then in my current novel, I mean, it represents like all of the above. Definitely like desire, resurrection, destruction, eternity, hope, hell, and purification all at the same time. And I find that usually it does. Usually when you're using fire, it represents a broad range of symbols, and that's maybe what makes it so appealing, because everyone who reads it can like interpret it in a different way that makes sense to them. It can be a bittersweet moment, it can be a happy moment, it can be a traumatizing moment. Sorry, I just got the notification that my AP World History BBQ essay was graded. That is, oh, okay. That is a very sad moment in my life. Sorry. I also think that it ties into sort of the, like, new obsession of gray morality, because it neither is good nor bad. Fire is morally gray now, I guess. Morally ambiguous. And I think it does have a deeper resonation, because nothing really is either good or bad, really. It's a whole broad gray spectrum. And I also think that it really does, like, strike a chord with people now, because some things are in such disarray that, like, fire, man. I don't know. Maybe it just looks cool. Maybe that's why we have such an obsession with fire. Because it is very, like, compared to other ways of destruction, it's very loud. It's very bright and in your face. So it does make a very large symbol that's very hard to ignore. Or maybe it just looks cool, like those scenes when you're walking away in slow motion from a building exploding behind you. Maybe that's what it is. And then the last thing in my notes just says, in conclusion, pyromaniacs are poets. No, I don't condone arson. Yep, this has been me, just expressing my adoration and confusion towards the general symbol of fire.